On today's show.
How do you outline your novel? It's a great question, and one that I get asked a lot, in particular for authors who really do want to sketch out the entire plot before they start writing most of the book. And so on today's episode, we're going to dive into how great writers build an outline, because it may be different than you thought. Most people don't set out from day zero all the way to the end of the story and write their outline that way. In fact, we're going to talk to you about something called moments that matter. On this episode, we're going to dive deeply into how many of today's great novelists actually use these idea of key moments that matter in order to develop the outline and develop the full story. This series is entirely dedicated to helping you develop and manufacture all the key things you need to write a great book. So if you like what we cover here, please subscribe and join us for more episodes where we cover everything from writing, from rewriting, and publishing on this channel. So let's dive in a little bit today's episode about how to actually create an outline for your novel. Now, we're going to talk today to Riley Sager. And Riley is an incredible author, 4-time New York Times bestseller. But one of the things that's really interesting is his work has really been developed by using the outline to help them. But what you'll find is it's not what you may think. It's not that he outlines the whole thing at the beginning. He originally starts with some key moments and expands it into an outline. And Riley has made this work pretty well. In fact, Stephen King called his 2017 debut the best thriller of 2017. So let's listen in to what Riley Sager tells us a bit about how he uses the idea of the outline in order to develop what becomes the entire book.
I'm a very, very big outliner. I outline a ton. And to use an example from Lock Every Door, it's this woman who moves into this takes a job as an apartment sitter in this mysterious, possibly sinister apartment building. And when one of the other apartment sitters there suddenly vanishes, she decides to try to find out what happened to her. And she uncovers a whole big scary thing. But so that's really where it started, was why would she stay? And so then in the outlining process, I came up with, okay, she stays, one, because she needs money. She's desperate. She lost her job. She lost her boyfriend. She doesn't have an apartment anymore. So she needs to stay in this building in order to make some money. And then I put like rules, like the building has rules for its apartment sitters. That was another way of keeping her inside. And then, why does she really want to find out what happened to this other apartment sitter who went missing? Well, because it turns out her sister, when she was a teenager, also went missing, and they don't know what happened to her. And so she has this soft spot for missing girls and, wants to find out what happened. So it's all these little pieces come together in the outlining process. So it is just, the more you think about it, the more these things can, fall into place.
And how much time does that take, like that process? Sometimes it's always interesting, like people are like, I sit down and I write in a start, but you're talking about the 9-weeker, right?
That one was crazy.
Yeah. But so generally when you put together a book, like now that you've got reputations to uphold a little bit, how much time do you spend in the building this out before you start really putting heavy pen to paper for at least that first draft?
It really depends on the book. The one that I just finished and my editor now has, I really didn't outline that at all. That was more like, okay, I'm just going to write and see what happens and, adjust as I go along. But my last one, Home Before Dark, I spent probably 7 to 8 months.
Wow.
Outlining it because the plot was so complex. It was, it's a book within a book, and
right.
The chapters alternate and one reflects the other and they're 25 years apart and things like that. So I really needed to have everything fit into place perfectly before I started writing. And so it was all outlining. Like I didn't really write any of it until that whole outline was done from start to finish. And once I was writing, the outline really didn't change.
Wow.
So it made the writing process very easy because I had spent so much time thinking about it and structuring it and plotting it out.
Interesting. And so you write in a genre too, like, so this thriller kind of, genre here, it's sort of designed on some of these like twists and turns. And one of the authors, Melina, she asked a good question, which was, How do you like build that in when you're sort of building it? Because you sort of got to have the right amount of it where it can't be like every corner you turn in, there's like a thing. It's this right balance you have.
Right.
And then it also has to resolve in it. How do you use, intentionality, I guess I'll say, to sort of think about the right balance here. So it's not like it fits in the way that you think about it.
That is part of the outlining process as well. Like to use Lock Every Door as another example, I knew I wanted to do an apartment sitter in a creepy apartment building.
Mm-hmm.
So then it became, okay, what's going down in this apartment building?
Mm-hmm.
That has to be, so I addressed that like even before I started outlining. Like, okay, I need to figure out what's going on here. And then I can sort of build the steps to bring us there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I usually do try to figure out the twist very early on. Like I start with, here's the idea, here's the log line, here's the characters, what's the end game? And then you can sort of structure how you see best to lead up to the end game. So a lot of my twists are built in before I really start outlining. And then sometimes one will just spring up all of a sudden. You'll be writing, you're like, wouldn't it be cool if this? And then sometimes you can do it, and sometimes we're like, no, this isn't going to work. So it's trial and error.
Now, if you've got an idea in your head of what your book's going to look like and you're struggling to make that into an outline, what we're going to do is we're going to develop our outline like Riley Sager does. And that is, we're going to use a technique called moments that matter. Most great books are not necessarily like all kinds of moments along the way, but usually we can remember as the reader about 6 to 8 core moments. And we call these moments the moments that matter. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to think about your book, your idea. And I want you to think in your head of what are the key things you can already see. They might be a key moment of tension, or it might be a key reveal, or it might be something that's, again, of romantic interest or what might have you. Think about movies as oftentimes at that moment when we sort of first meet Darth Vader, or that moment when we see Princess Leia, or whatever the action may be, something specific. Moments that matter should have 3 things. Number 1, a moment will have a date, it'll have a location, and it'll have some kind of action or dialogue. So I want you to think about what are those 6 to 8 core things. Don't try to worry about all the moments. Focus on the core things you can see and write them down. That's what you start by spending time with, is start by actually fleshing out the key things you can already see, the stuff that you know is going to happen, the tension points, the reveals, the conflict. Start with those pieces first and then spend time with them. Write out the plot, write out some key things going on, the characters that involved, the setting, the world building, key descriptive elements, but spend time on each of those moments that matter. And that's the first thing, those 6 to 8 pieces. Then once you have those, I want you to take them and start to kind of look at them in order. What is sort of the current sequence of it? And then think, how are the characters we have going to guide us from one to the other? And that's really the important thing. Once you wind up having sort of that structure of these kind of columns, these 6 to 8 moments that matter, then we need to have characters that take us to the next ones and figure out what needs to happen to move from those pieces. And that's really the core about how you build an outline. You start with a couple key pieces, these 6 to 8 moments that matter. You identify the characters and how do we need to have them take us along the way. And that's really the secret of an outline. An outline isn't necessarily like, here's where I am on day 1 and here's the end. How do I get there? It's about remembering there's kind of these key moments that matter to us along the way. The second thing I'll share with you a little bit about developing your outline is it's flexible. It's going to move around quite a bit. And so what I would share with you is, remember, as you're building out the outline, whether you want to get all the details or whether you just want to have these key points, is try to actually tell it to someone else. Now, it doesn't have to be someone that you're sitting next to. In fact, sometimes I'll actually just pull up my phone and talk to it and tell the story. But what I would recommend is find someone that you trust, a best friend, a roommate, a sibling, a parent, and sit down with them and say, can I talk you through the story? It might take you 15, 20 minutes, but you'll kind of walk through these key moments along the way. And the biggest advice is record it. Record the conversation and them talking. Turn on your phone and just record it on audio, whatever it might be, but go back and listen to it. Because what you're going to see is one of the biggest balance points that an outline can help you with is this balance between what we call pace and backstory and world building. These are two things that are at odds. You want to keep the reader going with pace, make sure they feel like they're moving forward, but you also want to have appropriate backstory and world building so they know where they're going. And that's the thing that you'll move back and forth on as you're actually developing your first draft and as you're putting together the book itself. So that's the big things, is don't try to outline from nothing. Pick the 6 to 8 moments, spend time with them, and then figure out how the characters move us forward, what needs to happen to move from these pieces, and then try it out. And that's the most important thing. Moments that matter: date, location, action, and dialogue. Spend time with each of those 6 to 8 ones, then figure out what characters would need to help us along the way, and then give it a try for size. And remember, writing an outline is a challenge, but it's also one of the most fun things you can do to have that full story out there. And then you got to write. And remember, the big word of advice: never write alone. So if you like what you heard here today, definitely drop a subscribe. We'd love to give you more episodes and insights about how you can go from this process of an idea all the way to a finished book. Thanks. And remember, never write alone. Psycho Mother Knife time, everyone. Kind of get your Psycho Mother Knife out here for this year.